Thank you so much for having me today. It's a real honour to be at the National Portrait Gallery. I'm Alice Cox, and I'm the Exhibition and Audience Development Officer at the Russell Coates Art Gallery and Museum in Bournemouth. The Russell Coates is well worth a visit if you haven't previously been. As you can see, it's home to Albert Moore's Midsummer and also Rossetti's Venus Verticordia, and it is always lovely and sunny in Bournemouth, as shown in the picture. So I'm here today to talk about an exhibition that I curated earlier this year to commemorate the 50-year anniversary since the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality. I'm going to talk about two main things during this presentation. One is the benefits of working with the local community to curate an exhibition, and the second is the challenges of curating an exhibition about an LGBTQ anniversary with a collection that's not hugely representative of the LGBT community. So how did I start? I was brought in to work at the Russell Coates just over a year ago now, in October 2016, and the exhibition was set to go up in April 2017, so it wasn't a huge amount of time to get going. The first thing I really had to do was to recruit volunteers from the local community, and I had to do that fairly quickly, mainly because there wasn't really very much time. So I went about this by advertising in local newspapers. I used a lot of social media. I put posters in sort of local community points, such as the library. But I think the main way I did this was actually by going to local groups and speaking about the project, explaining what we wanted from volunteers, and also what volunteers could really expect from volunteering at the Russell Coates. And I think this last one was possibly the most important because it gave people the opportunity to ask questions and engage with the museum in a way that you can't really do with a poster. So I was very lucky because our first meeting was incredibly well attended, and we were able to establish a core group of volunteers fairly early on. So how did it work? The volunteers came in for meetings at the museum, and we started brainstorming ideas about the sort of exhibition that we wanted to put on. We had two main criteria for the exhibition. That was one, obviously, to commemorate the anniversary, and secondly, that the exhibition could only really contain content from our museum's collection. So that meant no external loans. So this brings me on to the major challenge of the exhibition. So that's how to create an exhibition marking the 50-year anniversary since the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality without a content that really represents this anniversary existing in the museum's collection. So what did we do? Well, we met a number of times to plan the theme of the exhibition over tea and biscuits, and a number of ideas were put forward. For example, one idea was that we would put on an exhibition of objects and paintings from the countries where it's currently still illegal to be gay. So that's 72 countries. Another idea was that we could have a history of LGBTQ in Bournemouth. I think both of these would have been fantastic exhibitions, but after we did a little bit of research, again, we found that we just didn't have the collection to justify putting on either of these exhibitions in our main space. So we started to think more abstractly. How did we want the exhibition to feel? I think it's an odd question, but it's definitely an important one. Anniversaries generally feel like something to be celebrated, but we really did have to consider whether this was the way we wanted to go with this exhibition, as the introduction of the Sexual Offences Act in 1967 actually saw a rise in the prosecutions of the number of gay men. So in the decade after the introduction of the Act, a staggering 15,000 men plus were prosecuted just for being gay. Also, at the time of planning the exhibition, there were a number of news items about persecutions of LGBTQ people around the world that made us really carefully consider the tone of the exhibition. Having said this, we did decide that whilst it was necessary to acknowledge that LGBTQ rights are far from equal even today, we wanted, we did that in our introductory panel, we decided to put on an exhibition that celebrated the local LGBTQ community in Bournemouth now, and it really embraced everybody's differences and also collective experiences through art. We came up with lots of overarching themes for LGBTQ, but the one that we kept revisiting was the rainbow flag. So the rainbow flag is now really synonymous with LGBTQ worldwide. After deciding on this as our theme, we did some research into the flag. The original rainbow flag was designed by Gilbert Baker in 1978. Baker and a team of 30 volunteers hand-stitched the flag from material that they had hand-dyed. As it was prohibited to use dye in public washing machines in San Francisco, the group had to work overnight in secret to dye the cloth vibrant colours, and they cleverly covered their tracks by using bleach in the last cycle. I thought that was quite interesting. So the original design for the flag actually had 8 colours, as you can see here. That's with the addition of hot pink at the top and turquoise. And it was unanimously agreed by the volunteers and myself that these colours would hugely benefit our exhibition, so we kept them in. We decided to use the themes that were given to the original flag as a means of viewing the collection at the Russell Coates. So the themes that we had to work with were pink for sexuality, red, life, orange, healing, yellow, sunlight, green for nature, turquoise for magic/art, blue, serenity and harmony, and violet as spirit. After a good deal of discussion, we arrived at the suitable title for the exhibition, Refracted, as the collection was being refracted into the themes of the rainbow flag. So we went through the picture stores, as is demonstrated here, shortlisting a list of paintings that fitted into each theme. The exhibition was called Refracted Collection Highlights. So we selected pieces that not only fitted into the various themes, but were also highlights, both in terms of highlights generally, but also the volunteers' own personal highlights. Some of the highlights that we included, we were actually able to connect more directly with the LGBTQ anniversary, such as John Minton's painting, Painter and Model. This painting shows John Minton in his studio with his friend Norman Bowler, who is best known for his role as Frank Tate in Emmerdale. Minton was gay at the time when homosexuality was illegal. He was attracted to unavailable men, and his outgoing personality was an attempt to cover his resulting depression. So at the time of painting this, Minton was actually struggling with alcoholism. Another painting, which was selected by one of our volunteers, Nigel, was Simeon Solomon's The Annunciation. Solomon entered the Royal Academy schools when he was 16, and his work was first exhibited at the Royal Academy at the age of 18. Around the same time, he met Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and he was introduced to the Pre-Raphaelites, and he quickly became known as a darling of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. But this all changed on the 11th of February in 1873, when he was arrested in a public toilet near Oxford Street as he was found with a stableman. He received an 18-month prison sentence, but following an intervention from his family, he was released after 6 weeks. However, this arrest did have a lasting effect on him. He was ostracized, and he saw a decline in his fame and also his finances. He could no longer afford to buy oil paints towards the end of his life, and he spent the last years of his life in chronic poverty and died in St. Giles' workhouse in 1905. Another selection was made by one of our volunteers, Judith, and it was of a huge portrait of Rudolf Nureyev. We have 5 in the museum's collection. This painting was used as set dressing for the Ken Russell film Valentino in 1977 that was partly filmed at the Russell Coates. The film is loosely based on the life of Rudolph Valentino, an Italian-American silent film actor in the 1920s. The film Valentino was a failure, both commercially and critically, and Russell described it as one of his biggest mistakes in his career. However, a byproduct of the film is this magnificent portrayal of Nureyev. We don't know the artist, and we can only assume it was one of the set dressers on the film. Judith really liked this painting, and she ended up giving a radio interview on Radio Solent about it and a talk in the museum. Another volunteer, Marie, chose Alexandra Moffat's ring mistress, Susie Rayburn. Moffat is one of the central figures responsible for the emergence of the Scottish realist movement in the latter half of the 20th century. Marie used this painting to draw convincing parallels between the cabaret era in Berlin in the 20s and 30s and a film of the same name starring Liza Minnelli. I think this is probably mainly due to the subject's short hairstyle, bowler hat, and also slightly masculine dress. Marie also gave a talk about this that was very well attended. And this brings me on to the second point, which is the numerous benefits of working with volunteers. So the exhibition was completely shaped by them. The paintings that were featured would have been entirely different if we'd had a different group volunteer. And I think this is one of the things that I loved about the exhibition, that it was just so personal when you walked around. It was also a very fun process. The volunteers were able to be involved in all aspects of the exhibition from the start. They were trained in object handling, how to search for items on our database modes. Volunteers were also trained in research and text writing, which was actually hugely helpful as they were able to research and write a number of the labels that featured in the exhibition. I think an aspect that they would say was probably the most enjoyable was that they were able to go behind the scenes and look through our collections and paintings stores. And I think that really gave them an idea of the scope of working with a museum's collection. A major undertaking of the exhibition, as you can probably see here, are the bright colours on the walls that we used to denote the different themes of the rainbow flag. The volunteers were crucial in the painting process and, in fact, the entire installation process. We do not hire in external teams to do the installation or the wall painting. We all do it ourselves. So the volunteers really, really helped get this done and make it look as good as it does. Another benefit of working with volunteers was that they gave us a number of different talks during the exhibition. So these were well-researched presentations about the various paintings that they had selected. So every talk was completely different, and it really relied on what the volunteers had found interesting during the selection process. These talks were very popular, and I hope that it's something that we can actually continue to do in subsequent exhibitions at the Russell Coates. During the run of the exhibition, we also held a sort of varied programme of events to coincide with Refracted. So this included lectures, a film screening, and even a play. And these events were very well attended, and I think actually this is in part due to the support of the volunteers who were able to spread the word via social media, distribute posters, but also quite importantly they invited their friends, so it broadened our audience quite naturally. So what are the outcomes of this project? I think that the Russell Coates has benefited hugely from working with such a wonderful group of volunteers. The exhibition was very popular, and our footfall for the run of this exhibition was up from the previous year, which I don't think can be a coincidence. As the group was still together, we have started working with the Dorset History Centre, who, amongst other things, house the archive for Dorset. The Dorset History Centre are in the very early stages of collecting contemporary LGBTQ histories for their archive. Currently, this is an area which is slightly lacking, and it's quite hard to trace in the archive, and perhaps it's not accurately represented, so they're quite keen to get contemporary LGBTQ histories. So this has been a really great and also slightly surprising outcome. It certainly wasn't what we went in intending to achieve, but it's been great that we are now working with them. We all went on a trip to visit the centre and were shown around the archive. We saw a couple of archives about LGBTQ in Dorset, but most of them feature through size records. As a group, we discussed how we can work together to collect these important oral histories, and it's something that we're hoping to be working on more in the new year. Another outcome is that the same group who curated Refracted are currently working on a ceramics exhibition for spring 2018. Due to the training and experience from Refracted, the volunteers are able to work far more independently and have a much clearer idea of the process of putting on an exhibition. So this is a photo of us at a recent study trip to the V&A as part of our research for how to display ceramics in our exhibition in the spring. And I'll just finish on, whilst I was on this trip, I learnt quite a lovely piece of information that I thought was quite important to include in this talk, and it was that some of the volunteers had been to see a Queen tribute band. And I thought it was important to include this, as it just demonstrates how this exhibition brought people together in the local community who had not previously met. And I think that, for me, is what it's all about. Thank you.